I would like to welcome all participants, whether you joined via WebEx or whether you joined via YouTube live stream. I want to thank also here our partners of the Post Innovation Platform, particularly Swiss Post and Austria Post, and the sponsor of this event, Escher Group. Thank you very much to all of you. Some organizational points at the beginning. If you joined via WebEx, please make sure that your microphone is on mute, of course, unless you speak. You can ask questions, of course. Put those questions in the chat box. That's the easiest way. You can do that on WebEx. You can do that as well on live stream, YouTube live stream. We'll pick up those questions, put them forward to the speakers, depending, of course, on the time. And as always, we'll publish this webinar on our YouTube channel, so you can rewatch the presentations there. We do not really distribute the presentations after the event, but as I said, you can rewatch it on our YouTube channel, and there also rewatch the presentations. My name is Bernhard Buckertz, the chairman of the Post Innovation Platform, and I'll moderate today's online executive forum. It's called the Cross-Border Challenge 2021, and we all know that cross-border commerce is constantly growing. It's getting increasingly important for all the players in the market. And customers of Postal Express logistics companies, they want to ship easily without barriers or without any frictions from one country to another. They want to reach their customers in another country the same way they want to reach customers in their own domestic markets. However, there are, of course, as we know, barriers. There are customs, there are duties, taxes to pay, there are data requirements, information that has to be sent, all these different kinds of things. And e-commerce merchants or other sellers, they do not really want to worry about all those kind of things. They want to have a partner who takes care of it and who makes it as easy as possible for them. They want to have the seamless experience, no matter what the barriers and the rules and the requirements are. And in 2021, we have seen really a number of new rules and regulations coming into place. In the US, we have the STOP Act, for example, which will help to reduce the import of drugs through mail or parcels. In Europe, we have something similar, the ICS2, the import control system, where also a lot of data and information is required in order to avoid, well, some kind of shipments into the EU of items that are not allowed, or to prevent other kinds of threats. We have new VAT legislation coming into force in Europe as of 1st of July. As many of you probably know, we have currently a de minimis rule of 22 euros, and this will fall away. So what does it mean if it falls away as of 1st of July this year? You will require calculation, collection of VAT, for every item. You have checks from the customs authorities. So at the end of the day, it takes longer to get these things through customs, and it might also cost more. And then you have a lot of other rules and regulations that entered into force this year. Let's think about the UPU rate setting, the self-declared rates. We've made things a bit more complicated. You had Brexit and other regional events that had the same effect. So quite complicated, the situation right now, but fortunately we have three outstanding speakers here with us who will help us to better understand the implications, look together with us at possible solutions, and who will discuss with us what it requires to make cross-border shipments really a seamless experience. We have Peter Koller, he's the head of international affairs of Austrian Post. We have Olivier Storch, he's the EVP Asia Pacific, Americas and Urban Services at DPDgroup, and we have Brody Buhler, the CEO of Escher Group. So welcome, gentlemen, here, and I would like maybe to give the word and the floor here now to Peter. Peter, are you ready to share your slides and make the first presentation? We can't hear you, Peter.
Thanks.
You are still on mute. That's good. I mean, yeah. You listened at least to what I said before. Great.
Yes, I did. That's when I changed to mute. Bernhard, thanks a lot for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen, and you let me know, please, if it goes through smoothly. At the moment, I just have here saying that it's connecting. Well, we'll see. Maybe for those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Koller, as Bernhard mentioned before. I'm in charge of international affairs of Austrian Post, which basically covers a broad area of very cool topics, which I like a lot. It covers areas from international product management of letter mail products, international affairs like a traditional international relations type of thing, but also things like direct mailings into other countries. That's what I basically do together with my team of about 20 people. I've been with the company for about 8 years, and it never gets boring. In particular, last year and this year. Bernhard, are you seeing the presentation already?
It's opening. It's opening. Yeah, now I see it.
Okay, great. Why did I say that it never gets boring, and in particular not during the last year and this year? Well, last year you can imagine that due to Corona we faced lots of stumbling blocks in order to process things seamlessly, as Bernhard pointed out before. Customers, they want to have the same experience they get from their domestic market, also from their international mailings. And last year in particular was what was very strange, because a situation happened we would have never imagined it, and it still persists. It's that aircraft capacities is still scarce, and that's obviously no good news for universal service obligation. We're trying everything in order to open new routes which have been closed for almost a year now. Speaking from a small operator's point of view, who doesn't own any aircraft, because we don't have any like FedEx or DHL type of business, it's very difficult for us to move mail and parcels outside the country. At the moment, we're still speaking about around 100 countries. You cannot reach from Austria, so our customers, they cannot send items to many African countries or South American or Asian countries. So that has been a huge stumbling block, and it's going to continue like this for the next couple of months again, until the airline industry is kind of back to pre-corona mode. So that's one of one of our big challenges, and I just find this question very funny. I've spoken about it with someone from our ministry. The question for myself is, because sometimes we can see that airlines are flying into various destinations, but they wouldn't take any mail. So the question could be if post and mail and parcels, documents, e-commerce, if some of these items should be treated preferentially due to its universal service obligation. Yeah, that's just to start. I know that the topic of today's meeting concerns more the data aspect of our business, and I would from now on solely focus on the changes we're going to face from 1st of July here in Europe, where one can pose the question, are we ready? If I speak to my colleagues from operations, they are anxiously waiting, including me actually, for 1st of July to happen, because I'm not sure if posts are really ready. So on a checklist, you could say, okay, there is a couple of postal operators which provide us data with 6 weeks to go. The data quality is very good. I will jump on this aspect later. But then there is postal operators which don't give us any data. But we need data in order to comply with these new VAT rules, and also in order to install automatic processes to keep operating costs at the lowest end possible. So overall, I would not say we're sure. It's somewhere between yes or no. We could argue that from a UPU point of view, everything has been agreed. That's a private picture dating back, I think it was 1.5 years ago, when we met in Ethiopia, and when we decided that ITIMAT will become mandatory from 1st of January 2021. ITIMAT is of utmost importance to us. We have implemented an automatic customs process where we do everything based on the ITIMAT data we get. Sorry. So we face a huge challenge. I call this the challenge number one, that although it has become mandatory on a UPU level, we don't get any ITMET data from several big countries. They would say, no, we can't send you any ITMET because we haven't signed one of the data sharing agreements. There's 2 data sharing agreements, either governed by IPC or UPU, but never mind who's in charge of the data sharing agreements. It's still it's such a shame that we've had a rule in place for almost 6 months, and there's large countries which would not send us any data at all. I was texting back and forth with the large country, and they clearly said you cannot expect any data within the next couple of months. But 1st of July is going to happen. What shall Austrian Post do with items where we don't get any relevant data? We have costs, we have to cover these costs, so why not send these items back to their country of origin? Another problem is the ITMET quality. As I said before, if I had to answer the question if posts are ready or not, it would not be easy to say yes or no. So it's somewhere in the middle. With some of the operators, it's very good. With some, it's very bad. What are these challenges? We often get empty and incorrect data fields. This could be missing content, such as contact details or values or HS codes, you name it. But then we also still have the problem that undervaluation takes place. So our customer is looking at all the data very painstakingly, and if things are undervalued, this causes lots of troubles. We have additional processes we are going through. We have to get in touch with the recipient in order to make an accurate clarification of the value of the product. And still, but this is not such a new problem because it has existed for a long time, and we still have troubles with counterfeit products, and product piracy is still out there. And then, funny enough, even if we get data, there's lots of issues which cause confusion and in the end need additional resources. We, in many cases, get ITMET data for already customs cleared items. So with our automatic customs clearance process, where we said, okay, we will do a customs process once we receive an ITMET, this is not going to work for items which have been customs cleared, because our IT would say, okay, we get ITMET, and now let's do the customs processes, but it doesn't make any sense because the item is already cleared anyway. And then there's another few examples that we get ITMET data with a European Union sender's address and the European Union country of origin. So why would we get any ITMET data at all? Doesn't make any sense. And then, which makes a little bit more sense, we get a sender's address in the European Union, but with a country of origin outside the European Union. The last example is in particularly true for yellow sticker flows, like what we get from Postal or Beat Post or many other European operators. Yes, as I mentioned before, this all leads to operational inefficiencies, and we need additional resources. From 1st of July, I think we're going to employ 100 people more just to take care of the new VAT rules. We can have one hope, which would be IOSS, because it reduces to a large extent the complexity.
Peter, Peter, your microphone is, I think, out again. Peter, we can't hear you. Peter, can you hear me, Peter?
Shows our IOSS is not working.
If it will succeed, we have our guesses and our business cases, but I don't know if all these large platforms, in particular in China, like Ali or Wish, if they are going to sign up to IOSS. So we got 6 weeks to go. The message I want to leave here is that we need the accurate data in order to operate smoothly and have as low operating costs as without accurate data. We have 6 weeks to go. Let's see if this leads into a success. I thank you all for listening. Unfortunately, I just had the screen in front of me. I didn't see if there were any hands raised. Thank you all.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. There was just a few seconds. Your microphone apparently didn't work, so there was a few seconds which we couldn't hear you. But I think that was for half a slide or so. So don't worry. I think everybody got your message very clearly. I'm just moving away. I demake your presenter. There's a question for you, Peter. Who has responsibility for these failings? What has to be done in your opinion?
In my mind, the responsibility is with the outgoing post, because we signed up to rules underlying international law with the UPU, and these rules, unfortunately, there's no penalties out there. They have to be complied. I mean, we also have the rules sending items into the US or where we need the data regarding the Stop Act and what you mentioned before. So I think the answer is quite simple. It should be the sending post, because the sending post subscribe to these UPU rules, but unfortunately there is no penalty mechanism out there.
A quick question: why are so many posts behind this? Really, why did so many posts? Why can't they send the IT messages and be ready in time? Is it resources? Is it know-how?
It's resources in terms of you need to have a front end in place in order to catch the data. Last year we did our homework in this respect, so we introduced rules at our post office where it's mandatory to leave us the data, which is obviously also written on the CN22. If people don't do this, we're going to charge an extra of €3.90, or is it €2.90, something like that. We also have with our large business customers, even for the letter mail business, front ends in place where it's only possible that they leave us their items if data is provided. So you have to invest, but it was not a lot of money we did invest. It's rather straightforward. You have to invest in IT, but also in particular with the new rules regarding the US, you have to invest in people, because some additional scanning needs to take place. So it's mostly IT and manual processes.
Thank you very much, Peter. I'd like to move on to our next speaker, Olivier, EVP Asia Pacific Americas and Urban Services, DPDgroup. As I said before, you're ready. You have your slides ready as well.
Yeah, I do. I am. Let me try to share. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your slides. Perfect.
Okay, great. So maybe first, Bernard, to bounce back on what you were saying, that the customer hopes for continuing buying online without the, I would say, documentation or paperwork hassle. What one can say, and I will concur to what Peter was mentioning, I'm not going to say no, I'm going to say it's going to be difficult in the second portion of the year, at least. So just a few slides with many figures, but very simple ideas. This first slide is to say, well, cross-border is a massive trend within e-commerce, insofar, let's say. So not only e-commerce is growing, but its cross-bordering portion is growing as well, which you can see. So that means within 11 years' time, you grew from 200+ billion US of revenues to 2.5 billion. So this has been multiplied by 2, meaning that the overall pie is growing, and the portion which is real cross-bordering is also growing, to the extent that in 2025, if no bump in the road, we'll come back to that, cross-border e-commerce should be representing about 37% of total B2C e-commerce. The second idea is that it may seem obvious, but it's worth mentioning. Cross-border flows are predominantly cross-bordering, actually, meaning that when you look at what is being made of cross-bordering flows, 1/3 of that is originated from China, which is not a big surprise because it still is the manufacturing plant for the world. 15% of these flows are being originated from the US, and about a quarter of those flows are going into Europe. And that's where it's going to be a problem, because we're going to see that indeed the easiness of these flows might be reducing over the time. So we are really talking about long hauling, and it's not about nearshoring when we are talking about B2C flows, and it's very important to remember. The next idea is that, and we all know that once upon a time there was international trade, and international trade was relying on containers and boxes and pallets. And with the birth and rise of e-com, pallets eroded towards international parcels, which we know, whether we work in commercial networks such as DPD or DHL, or we work with the Post, these pallet flows eroded into parcel flows. But the truth is that customers remain very price sensitive. All studies show that. And they would prefer a longer lead time with free, cheap delivery. And that's not a surprise. And again, I'm bouncing back on what Peter was mentioning, the fact that most of these flows over the past years were carried by postal operators. If you look, 2014, 80% of those flows were postal origin, the rest being mostly the integrators or other networks. In 2018, and I will even say 2020, we still have a good 70+% of these flows being operated via postal channel due to the easiness in terms of documentation and the very low pricing. The problem is, as just mentioned, the new regulation is arising. And what we need to factor in is that this new regulation does not come out of the blue. One of the ground reasons for that regulation to be implemented is to import more stickiness into these B2C cross-bordering flows for two reasons. One is, of course, security, and we tend to forget all these security aspects with especially the ICS regulation. We all know ICS 1, 203, ICS 2 is being implemented nowadays, together with the fiscal evolution on the low value consignment, and the VAT evolution as of next July 1st. So I'm not going to deep dive into everything, but the truth is, and I do concur to what Peter was saying, we do hope for IOSS to be functioning, but the truth is, well, nobody knows. And you have countries where we are forced to deter our customers to register at the moment because we know that the national platform for IOSS is not working. So I would say in the long run, we know that such things as data sharing and pre-alerting will work ultimately. But the truth is that in the near term, we're going to face massive difficulties, be it due to the unpreparedness from the Post, the operators, the state themselves, and it's going to be very complex to switch from the current system to the new VAT system as of next July 1st, 2021, if you are a European customer. But that you might have already experienced if you used to import goods from the UK since the 2nd of Jan or ship goods to the UK. So overall, what is the situation? Do we believe, and of course we will deep dive, I guess, in the Q&A, do we believe that the new regulation is going to hamper the continuous growth of the cross-border B2C flows, which I was mentioning in the beginning? we have two reasons to believe that this trend is going to continue. The first is the overall e-commerce growth. And well, we all know that the pandemic crisis caused this overall e-commerce growth to further accelerate. We all believe that we are back in 2025. We have recorded 3 years in a row back last year due to the pandemic crisis in terms of internet usage, the customers getting used to ordering online and so forth. The second very strong proponent to say that these flows are continue to grow is the boom in online shopping again. And what we see is even the fact that we are past the usual categories of garment and high tech to anything now. Now, it's true that we are facing strong headwinds. One, which was mentioned in the first presentation, in the surge in air capacity. I would even say sea capacity, as we all know as well. And it's true that as long as the passenger flights did not come back to normal, which is now being predicted for 2024, 2025, we will not be in a real position to support the air capacity that is needed to support these cross-border flows. The next problem is, of course, and I rank it before the UPU regulation, because the UPU regulation, in a way, is a postal problem, which will find its way in terms of solvability. But the thing is, this abolition of VAT threshold, as you know, previously you had zero documentation for everything that was above 22 euros or self-declared 22 euros. VAT becoming mandatory on all shipments will have two consequences. Overall increase in market prices, and that is a given. If you couple the UPU regulation with the VAT, it is a given that the price are gonna spike, not to the extent of the price you will find in the express world, but you will most probably have a rebalancing between both. The next thing is that, of course, you have to work with people able to share the data. And it's been very comforting for us as an operator to see in the last weeks that major platforms, Wish, for instance, decided to switch their mind and to register as IOSS. And we believe in the midterm that most large exporters from Asia will have their IOSS registration. But the truth is that in between, we're going to create a very complex situation. And if I just finish with that, speaking on behalf of DPDgroup, but as well La Poste Group, which is our main shareholder, there is a growing concern within La Poste, and I guess this might be the same with my colleagues from other countries, that the postman might be facing difficult situations when data have not been transferred before and thereafter, rights not been clear, and you will ask the poor postman on the ground to try get the duties. And this is a growing concern for us in several countries. That's what I can say on the short-term and mid-term challenges for the cross-border flows, Bernard. And happy to answer any question.
Thank you very much, Olivier. There's one question which was put forward. Well, it was initially to Peter, but I think you can also answer to it, Olivier, and maybe Peter can also say a word on it. If ITMET, the message, is unclear, for example, missing data, what happens to the item?
It depends. It depends. I would say it depends on the network. What we believe is you should not, under ICS, we are under very close scrutiny from the regulators. So if ITMAT is incomplete, unclear, blurred, after a while, you will have to identify those failing origins, and your responsibility is to stop the flows, because otherwise you are carrying over the responsibility onto the shoulders of your network if you accept flows that should be regularly declared. So that's a big deal. It's not so much a problem at the final destination that you cannot deliver. It's the problem that you're transferring onto your own responsibility the misregulation.
Peter, you want to add something? Peter, we don't hear you, Peter.
Thank you.
Now
Thank
we
you.
can hear you.
I was following your.
Yeah, you were on mute again.
I'm deeply sorry. If I may add to that, because as Olivier pointed out, we carry over the responsibility, and that's a very difficult question for us. So we are currently distinguishing between two types of, let's call it, missing ITMAT. If there's no ITMAT being sent at all, we're seriously considering, or we've started discussions like that, to return the items back to the country of origin. And for the second thing, if the ITMAT is just inaccurate, and let's say there's the value missing or there's an email address missing, we would of course look at all the CN22s and check if the information is available there. And if it's not available, we would get in touch with the recipient. But we would charge extra money, of course, because if there's no data, someone has to collect the data and then move it through customs, which is increasing costs. It's rather easy. And for me, the most difficult question would be, let's say, 1st of July, we get thousands of items not carrying any data. What are we going to do with these items? It will be very difficult discussions to have with other countries as well.
Great, Peter. Thank you very much. There were a few other questions, but I think we'll pick them up at the general discussion, because those are questions I'm sure Brody has as well some answers to it. So I would now like to move on and give Brody the floor.
Thank you, Bernard. I'll see if I can.
Yeah, we can see your slides, Brody.
Okay, let me get this into presentation mode. So great to be with you. As Bernard said, Brody Buhler, I'm the chief exec of Escher, and excited to have some time with you today to talk about what we're starting to see in cross-border. As you heard from Olivier, this is a fast-growing area, moving quite quickly, and he gave you a little further out. Our analysis shows that we're approaching a quarter of all e-commerce coming from cross-border. And while the growth in cross-border slowed during the pandemic, we've seen that reaccelerate post-pandemic, and starting to see a lot of activity in that space. And so it's going to be an enormous part of the business, and an enormous area of opportunity for postal operators, and something that will be important to get right going forward. This is also a really topical area because of all the things that are going on, and you've heard both Peter and Olivier talk about ICS2 and some of the things that are happening with within the UPU. You've also got a lot of activity around commercial lanes being established, and so instead of a traditional post-to-post interaction, working out other relationships within those countries that would allow you a different cost profile and a different speed profile as well, especially with self-declared rates coming through from the UPU, and so we're really seeing some rebalancing there. And my expectation is, kind of looking back to one of Olivier's slides, as everybody knows, there's a lot coming out of China, and that was remarkably imbalanced because of what was happening with the UPU rates. My expectation is we'll see that those lanes change most dramatically, and have been seeing those lanes change most dramatically over the last couple of years. And then the last I want to talk about on this slide is just briefly on the new entrants. We've seen a remarkable amount of activity in this space of startups, and actually they're now a couple of years old, so in the market for a bit, coming in and offering very different profile of delivery. It's all language specific, so that you don't have to go through and navigate in English or some other language. You can operate within your native language, and then they're piecing together the components in an integrator sort of way, but integrating multiple different parties. And an example I often use is one that we looked at that was going into Costa Rica from the US. They were using free shipping to their hub in Miami. It was $1 per kilo of lift to get it down to Costa Rica, and then a couple dollars to get it through customs. And then they were using a startup down there for the last mile, and we're paying about $2.50 for that last mile delivery. So about $5 of cost for a next day delivery from the US into Costa Rica. If you compare that to UPS, FedEx, and USPS, which were the predominant lanes from the US into Costa Rica, the next cheapest, this is now price versus cost, but the next cheapest option was $37 to get it in there. So that gives you a sense of the spread there. I think it's likely to believe that those companies weren't making ridiculous margins on those lanes into Costa Rica. So these new entrants we're seeing spring up in quite a few places, and Olivier pointed to kind of the market share change that we've seen with postal organizations. Our expectation is that trend will continue as these new entrants continue to piece together networks. So what does all that mean? There's 4 things I wanted to spend just a little bit of time on here around cross-border that we think are essential to get right over the next year and a half. The first is a DDP option that would allow entrance into the country with those duties and taxes being prepaid by the sender. Olivier talked about, or maybe it was Peter that talked about that problem that the postal operator has as the postman shows up and has to collect those duties and taxes. That's becoming more problematic as people become less comfortable or less accommodating to that shock of something landing and having to have the duties and taxes collected. I remember a conversation I was having about a year ago with a retailer who had just implemented DDP for all their outbound international shipments about a year previously, and they had talked about the hesitation they had in moving to something like that, a DDP option, because they were worried that the incremental cost at checkout was going to lower conversion. And one of the remarkable things that they found is that not only did it increase conversion, but it increased their cross-border sales by about 84%. So it gives you a sense of the impact that this can have on retailers as well as an improvement in the customer experience. And so DDP offerings will become important going forward, and it's something that traditionally posts have been less able to offer. The next is around this green lane, and I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but the sharing of the data and then being able to move things through customs quickly, especially with the various changes that are coming in, Stop Act in the US and ICS2 in Europe, and the VAT changes that are occurring. That sharing of data has got to improve, and it's got to become not just more prevalent, but more accurate. And both Peter and Olivier have talked about what you do when the data is bad. To have to pull that data off of CNs or other places and get that entered into the systems that would allow for an expedited process through customs can be very costly. And so it'll be important that all of the postal operators be working at enhancing their ability to capture that data. At Escher, we've partnered with Hurricane to be able to enable that as items come across the counter. And one of the things that we're finding is that you can remarkably lower the cost of capturing that data by using a tool like Hurricane to do that. And so that integration that we've had makes it possible to capture that data as it's coming across your counters. And while that's still an exception today, our expectation is that's going to change soon. The next is around this product screening and being able to identify products or senders that are problematic at origin, and not having to then pass that on to the post. And again, both Peter and Olivier spoke of this problem of when you receive an item that hasn't been properly declared, or receive an item that you shouldn't, you now got that issue of how to take it through that exception process. So screening in advance and stopping things at origin versus having them come onto your borders or into your network becomes a major enhancement needed to make these flows less costly and more efficient. And then the last is this is a focus on getting the cost and the complexity out of the returns. Cross-border returns can be a challenging space. And as we've looked at this with retailers, everybody knows that one of the biggest elements to conversion and sales within e-commerce is free shipping. That is the number one criteria for that first purchase. The number one criteria for making a second purchase, whether you come back again, is the complexity of the return process. And so critical to creating valuable customers that are retained, total lifetime value, those sorts of things, as well as the customer experience, is this returns process. And it's got to become more simple. It's got to become easier to use, and the friction needs to be taken out of that for cross-border items. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Bernard. Thank you for giving me a little bit of time today.
Thank you very much, Brody. I have an interesting question for all three of you here, and it's coming from Elmar Teume. Is anybody prepared to estimate the overall impact on cross-border volumes for next few years? That is to balance the growth against the negative influences. So what's the impact of all these kinds of things on the growth of cross-border e-commerce? What are your views? I'm asking all three of you.
I'm not sharing accurate data from our business cases, but we expect our cross-border influx to decrease by double-digit percentage figures.
Okay, maybe Olivier, you want to say something?
Yes, difficult to answer. We're gonna have an intermediate period, that's for sure, and the growth will at best slow down, if not decrease, over the past 6 to 12 months. It will also depend on the ability of the largest platform to organize themselves to share the data. Let's say one of the areas that we must probably grow is, I would say, bonded 3PL warehouses for these platforms stationed within Europe, from which they will share the data. So that means less cross-border flows with parcels as such, but you will still order online. The goods will already be in Europe in a bonded warehouse. That's probably the case.
What is your view, Brody? What's going to be the impact on this? Do you also see that overall cross-border volumes are going to decrease, or what's going to be the impact of all these kind of new regulations and rules?
Cross-border volumes are definitely going to increase. Postal cross-border volumes, I think, is where there's a lot of ambiguity in it, and a lot of that will depend on the investments that are made to make that easy and seamless and frictionless. I expect we'll have seen and will continue to see declines in the short term, but if the right investments are made, I could see that growth trajectory going again. But cross-border shipping itself is growing quickly, and like I said, slowed for a period during the pandemic, but is accelerating it again now based on the data that we're looking at.
In my mind, there's two questions we have to answer here. What's the price differential between shopping, let's say, at Amazon or a domestic marketplace compared to shopping at Wish? Our customers charged from 1st of July. So if I had bought a USB stick every year for the past couple of years. Let's say I bought one and it cost me €5. Am I willing to pay €6 now, even if everything was done seamlessly and got into Austria smoothly? There's an increase of €1. So the question would be, am I going to pay this USB stick to Amazon and purchase it there? And then the question is, if I'm going for Amazon shopping, would an item being sent by Amazon, and let's stay with the example of Austria, would this be counted as a cross-border parcel? Because it's a direct entry type of business we have with Amazon and all these large online stores. Overall, I'm with Brody, of course. I think that, just spoken from cross-border perspective, in the sense that it comes from another country, I'm with you. I'm also with you that probably post to post will go down, but still, cross-border is not particular cross-border, as stupid it may sound.
That's an excellent point, Peter. The rise in these bonded warehouses and staging the goods in country is certainly a trend to watch, and will have an impact. So while it might come from another country, it might not enter your cross-border network. It might ride entirely on the domestic network, and I think there'll be a lot of that as we continue.
Yeah.
I think what we also have to consider is, okay, we have an increasing costs, because yes, there are new taxes to pay, for example, some of those cases at least, but a lot is administration costs, because there's this data handling and all the other things around it. Now, I mean, we know how those things play out sometimes, but who is going to pay the bill at the end of the day? I mean, will all those administration costs finally really be handed over to the e-merchant or to the buyer, or will, at the long run, somehow be the posts or other shippers, commercial shippers, be kind of forced in a competitive environment to bear part of those costs? How do you see that? Who is paying the bill?
Well, you have two different costs, Bernard. One is, as you mentioned, administrative costs, documentation costs, which will have to be charged. So the logistics operators are facing the shippers, which they will charge, and the shippers will try to pass the bill on to the final consumer. But the second largest cost is not so much the administrative cost itself, it's the cost of the fiscal regulation. I mean, what you have to bear in mind, and that was the example of Wish versus Amazon, is for the same type of goods, there are cases whereby you pay taxes and other cases whereby you don't pay taxes, which is the exact reason why states have decided unanimously to implement a change of VAT. So it's I mean, it's not the cost which is new, it's the way to optimize which is going to be made much more difficult. Just to finish with that, you have a very good example with what's happening with the Brexit. When you cross a border, if you really have to bear the burden of crossing the border, meaning the documentation and the taxes, you go back to normal, and back to normal in terms of international trade is via a container, because you pay one time fee for documentation. It's completely different. And when we look at Brexit has led to the decrease of parcel flows between the UK and EU for the past month. Not so much the end of trade, but the goods are not flying through parcels. They are being palletized at the moment. That's the thing.
Olivier makes an excellent point, I think, there, that if you look at some of these administrative costs, to your question, Bernard, I see them dissipating, right, as technology is put into place and makes it easier. You know, today there's some really kludgy processes, but a very seamless integration with a retailer. They know all the data that needs to be put in that item map, for example. They transfer that over, you transfer that to the customs organization, you transfer that to the additional post. And so that as the technology evolves and the integration improves, the administrative costs come down. But there's still some real costs in there, and we're going to see reshaping of trade lanes as those costs. You can't wave a technology wand at VAT, for example, and or the transport costs that are incurred. So there's some of those costs that are real, and you'll see reshaping of trade lanes around those. But I think admin costs will be primarily addressed by technology.
I think that's a very, very good answer. Also, the one from Olivier, and to your question, Bernard, which was also a very smart question. I think in the end, if technology plays out its biggest strength to make processes very seamless, the only loser in this game is the recipient who pays an extra VAT for an item he hasn't paid VAT before. So in today's world, we have all the prerequisites to run these systems smoothly, but unfortunately, we are not very far ahead in the game at this moment, as I pointed out in my presentation. If all the data was accurate, if all the large platforms would register for IOSS, it would be just a normal item being sent from country A to country B.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Olivier, there's a question for you that came up. Did you say that did you say that the national platform for IOSS, for IOSS is not working? Can you explain what the issue is?
Well, I'm not going to give the name of the country, but what we have been monitoring is that you need to register the IOSS in a given country. I mean, of course, it's a registration that works for the EU, but you make your registration in a given country, be it France, Spain, Netherlands, and so forth. And what we have been noticing over the past weeks, and we hope for improvement before July 1st, is that some of these platforms are not passing the mark as we speak. So we have clients saying, well, I'm registering in that country onto the platform to be granted the IOSS access with my IOSS number. And what we are saying is, okay, maybe you should wait for a while, because we know, and we know also from discussion with the authorities, that they are still working on the IT bridging. So that's the point.
Thank you. The question came from Kate Moot of the International Mailers Association. She's also with us here, and I asked her before the meeting if she wants to say a few words also on the US perspective, as she's representing a couple of mailers who are struggling in the end of the day with all these kind of issues. Kate, are you with us?
Hi, yes, Bernard, I am. Thank you for.
Great. Please.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and
okay.
we can see you.
Good. Well, we are struggling, and I learned an awful lot today, and now I feel like we're going to be struggling with even more that I didn't realize. But I wanted to ask just a question of Peter. One of the things that we aren't sure of here is which countries require email addresses, which countries require the HS codes, and recipient email or phone number. And because it is not required by the Postal Service in the shipping services, in the data that the mailers submit, but will that get pieces hung up, like in Austria, if it doesn't have the recipient email address, and yet it's not required, or it's considered conditional, and we need to know by country which that is? Is there sort of a clearinghouse where we can discover which countries require that?
That's a very good question, and at the moment we have a survey out there that at least for IPC members to answer precisely these questions. I can give you an insight in how it would be treated in Austria. So let's say if there was no email address or phone number, it would be very difficult for us to get into touch with the recipient. Of course, if there was a problem, we have to send them an email. But it would not mean that the item is stopped. We would still let's say if there was all the other data available, we would try to deliver the item and then charge our normal customs handling fee. Of course, in the future, when we think about system where the recipient would get maybe a discount on the customs handling fee of, let's say, I don't know, I'm just brainstorming, of €1 instead of paying €10, we would need, of course, an email address to interact with him digitally.
It sounds like we should be collecting this information because it's going to be required eventually, even if the sort of at the front end here, the system hasn't said, yes, you need to provide this. Eventually we will.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Practical reasons.
Then just one other thing on the Stop Act, I just wanted to note that, you know, it's, even though the requirements took effect on January 1st for 100% collection from all countries coming into the United States, I think many of you know that there was a rulemaking that Customs and Border Protection is the agency that does write some of the implementing rules. They had a comment period opened to accept further input on the regulations. They've now just today extended the comment period another 30 days, which is unusual that you have a final rule after, you know, the law took effect. But I'm not quite sure why they reopened the comment period. We did submit comments, as did a number of other entities. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but they did grant a 1-year, it's called informed compliance, which is essentially something of a grace period. It allows the Postal Service and Customs to not implement, or excuse me, to not, well, it's like a relaxed compliance period, I guess, for lack of a better word. But in the meantime, it's the effort for the Postal Service to work with Foreign Post to ensure that they are compliant. And I know, you know, I can see Keith and some others that are in the audience there. This idea of a relaxed compliance for a year is not supported by everyone, but that is where things are at right now.
Thank you very much, Kate. Before we close the meeting, one question I think is still possible. I don't know whether it's a question where an answer is quick. Are any posts moving away from UPU post-to-post flows to using, for example, freight and warehousing suppliers? Do you see this kind of development in the market?
That's definitely a trend.
Mm-hmm. Olivier, do you have any?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, we not only that, but we're also trying to set up, I would say, a dual offering between Ascendia and DPDgroup, for instance. So that's, we're trying to, maneuver the flows, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you very much for that. I see that there are, I think I've tried at least, and I think we have really asked all the questions that came in the chat box. I think we can all agree that this is really a topic that's extremely important. I mean, it's not only that it has such a huge impact on this part of the business that's really growing so much over the past few years, and there's just lots of new rules and regulations and requirements, data requirements and everything, and everybody is struggling somehow. There are many open questions. We've seen a question from Kate, for example. What is required, but what at the end is maybe not required, but still it's a must to do, because otherwise some things simply will not work out. We have all those other things where you say, okay, e-commerce merchants must abide by some of these rules. They have to deliver. They have to provide all the different kind of data and information, which then have to be forwarded and handled. It's difficult for everybody, and difficult in particular for those that are dealing with these kinds of questions every day. I mean, the posts and the shipping companies, everybody here is really at the front line in coming up with solutions. But even there, I mean, it's not so straightforward. If you've seen from Peter, for example, and from Olivier, the examples that you have brought up, there are those challenges out there, and partly those systems that are in place are working, partly they are not really working. Partly some countries are providing the data, others are not providing the data. It is a challenging year, and I think this is just one of the many discussions this year that will deal with it. I think there will be many more over the year with a lot of practical questions. But every and each of these discussions is important and necessary in order to get answers, at least to some of those questions that will then help us to move forward step by step by step. And I think the overall goal is still the same one. That's what all post and express and logistics companies at the end of the day want. They want to provide their customers with a seamless experience. And if they master all these kind of challenges that are in the room here, then it will be a seamless experience, even though in the back end, it will be a hell of a job. It will be a lot of things to do with a lot of resources and quite complicated. But at the outside, everybody will have still the opinion, well, it's like a domestic service, and that's how it should be. Let's hope it at least, even though the costs might increase and all these different other things. But still, I think having the seamless experience is the #1 goal. I would like to thank at this point our three speakers here, Peter from Austria, Postal, Olivier from DPDgroup, and Brody Buhler from Escher Group. Thank you very much for providing your insights and sharing your views on this important topic. Thank you for all the other participants and their questions here. I think there were good questions and we had a good discussion. Maybe this is a topic we'll pick up again in the second half of the year. Let's see. By then, maybe we know a bit more about some of the developments. For today, that's it. Thank you very much again to everybody. It was great to have you here with us and to having this discussion. Have a great remaining day. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you, guys.